In the age of cameras everywhere, some things are captured in horrifying detail. What you're about to see isn't Hollywood fiction or staged entertainment. In this video are 6 stories when ordinary people faced terror, and the cameras kept rolling. It was March 19, 2016 in Dunedin, Florida. The air was calm after dusk, humid and quiet except for the faint hum of traffic from US 19. Inside a modest single-story house of the Carter family, the ground beneath had been shifting for weeks. David Carter, 38, worked as a general contractor for a small roofing company. He was cautious with money and proud of renovating the 1970s ranch home they'd purchased months earlier from an estate sale. His wife, Melissa, 36, often filmed family moments. Their son, Ethan, was 7. The house had recently passed an inspection, and David had reinforced parts of the foundation himself. He considered it secure, never suspecting the terrain beneath their neighborhood could give way without warning. The region's karst limestone made it prone to sinkholes, especially after heavy rainfall followed by a period of drying. In early March, Dunedin had seen weeks of rain followed by sudden heat, which increased water table fluctuations and weakened the limestone cavities below. Neighbors had reported faint tremors at night, low vibrations that rattled dishes, but assumed it was distant construction or heavy trucks. The Carters dismissed it as well, their attention focused on finishing small repairs and filming Ethan's bedtime routine for Melissa's video collection. That evening, around 8:45 p.m., Melissa set up a tripod-mounted camera in the living room, while Ethan arranged his toys near the couch. The home security system was armed, capturing audio from 3 rooms. David was in the garage, cleaning paint rollers. Cloud backups from the home's security network preserved the footage Melissa had been recording that evening, including the living room feed synced from her tripod camera. The footage shows calm, casual conversation. At 8:52, a low, grinding rumble began. Steady, rhythmic. In the background, a subtle vibration caused a lamp to tremble. Melissa glanced down, uncertain. A faint snap followed, the sound of subfloor concrete cracking. Ethan turned toward her, confused. The rumble deepened. Seconds later, a sharp crack echoed through the room as a fissure zigzagged across the tile flooring, moving from the hallway toward the couch. Dust rose as drywall seams split open. Melissa's voice spiked in panic as she grabbed Ethan's arm, but before she could move, the entire center of the living room dropped suddenly, tilting toward a widening void. Ethan and Melissa vanished instantly from the frame. The camera, still recording, slid forward and struck the floor, capturing a final 2 seconds of twisting shadows and the sound of crumbling material. The garage collapsed next. A neighbor across the street reported hearing a roar like thunder underground, followed by a hollow thud. David's truck lurched forward as the concrete beneath it buckled. He never made it out. Within moments, the structure had sunk almost entirely, leaving only part of the roof and debris field visible above a swirling pit of water and sand. The cavity measured roughly 35 feet wide and 20 feet deep when first responders arrived after a 911 call from the neighbor. Rescue crews worked through the night using cranes, sonar, and floodlights to assess the site. Structural engineers determined the cavity had formed directly beneath the foundation slab, its walls too unstable for entry. Only sections of the roof truss and furniture were visible amid the slurry. By dawn, the search was suspended. The void had widened and begun refilling with groundwater, sealing access. The surrounding 2 properties were evacuated and later condemned after subsurface imaging revealed continued erosion through shared limestone channels. County engineers stabilized the area by pressure grouting the cavity over several days. The event was classified as a sudden catastrophic collapse caused by progressive subsurface dissolution. The Carters' remains were never recovered. It was June 11, 2018, in the South Atlantic Ocean, as the cargo freighter Marauder made steady progress along the Agulhas Current. Winds from the southwest were building, but to the crew, this was ordinary weather for the southern shipping lanes, unpredictable yet routine. Captain Manuel Ribeiro, 46, had spent over 20 years at sea, known among his peers for his meticulous logs and calm manner during storms. Born in Lisbon, and trained by a Portuguese shipping firm before joining a Panamanian-flagged line, Ribeiro valued documentation as much as seamanship. He regularly recorded bridge operations with the vessel's video system, later using the footage to brief new hires on safety procedures. The Marauder was a 350-foot general cargo vessel, categorized as a handy-size freighter, carrying auto parts and a crew of 8, bound for Perth. Its navigation system and radar were standard for coastal freight operations, though the hull had been retrofitted years earlier and carried a reputation for mild instability in heavy seas. Ribeiro knew the Agulhas region's dangers, the meeting of warm current and cold fronts that sometimes spawned towering rogue waves, but he had never encountered one personally. That night, the Marauder passed south of Port Elizabeth under deteriorating weather. Satellite reports had warned of gale-force winds and steep swells ahead, but the captain, confident in the vessel's course, decided to maintain speed to stay on schedule. The crew tightened lashings on deck as lightning began to flicker over the horizon. At 1:50 a.m., the first officer logged sustained winds at 55 knots, visibility dropping below 800 feet. By 2 o'clock, waves were breaking over the bow with regular force. Ribeiro remained on the bridge, reviewing radar while instructing his crew to monitor ballast tanks. 15 minutes later, the ship's log recorded abrupt spikes in pitch and roll. The vessel's cameras showed sheets of seawater hitting the glass, and the lights flickering as the power system struggled. Then came the flash, a brilliant burst of lightning that illuminated an impossible sight, a wall of sheer water rising directly off the bow. At 2:13 a.m., the rogue wave struck. The impact drove the bow downward. The bridge windows imploded instantly, throwing glass and seawater into the control room. Ribeiro was seen bracing himself against the console, shouting commands as alarms blared. The vessel rolled nearly 30 degrees to starboard, the sound of tearing steel echoing through the hull. A camera fixed to the ceiling showed a blur of rushing water and falling light panels. Below deck, the engine room flooded faster than the pumps could compensate. Crew members trapped near the galley attempted to reach the ladder, but were swept back by incoming water. Those above deck had no time to react. The next wave struck midship, fracturing the superstructure. The noise, captured on the audio track, was a grinding metallic roar, followed by muffled shouting. By dawn, the Marauder was gone. The emergency locator beacon activated at 5:42 a.m., likely after breaking free from the sinking hull. Maritime authorities initiated a search along the current's drift path, and 4 days later, a South African fishing vessel discovered floating debris, life rings, twisted sections of hull plating, and an oil slick. No bodies were recovered. Investigators retrieved the voyage data recorder intact, confirming extreme vertical acceleration consistent with a rogue wave estimated at roughly 80 to 90 feet. The official investigation, led by South African authorities in coordination with Panamanian authorities, classified the loss as a structural failure due to extreme hydrodynamic impact. The Marauder and its 8 crew members were declared lost at sea. In Lisbon, Captain Ribeiro's family held a closed memorial service attended by representatives from his former shipping company. Several crew families, based in Brazil and the Philippines, later filed compensation claims against the vessel's Panamanian operator, citing neglected hull maintenance and inadequate storm advisories. It was April 17, 2017, in Geismar, Louisiana, where morning humidity hung heavy over the industrial corridor. Workers in reflective gear moved through the maze of pipes and catwalks at the Tripar chemical facility, performing their usual start-of-week routines. But for Chuck, it would be his last. Charles Chuck Denton was 42, a veteran safety consultant with 2 decades of field experience. He had worked at nearly every major refinery between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. His company had built a solid reputation handling risk audits for volatile materials, ammonia, methanol, and hydrogen systems, where small errors could cascade into catastrophe. Away from work, he was quiet and practical, and a father of 2. For the April contract, Denton had been brought in to complete a quarterly inspection of Tripar's ammonia scrubber system, a complex network designed to neutralize toxic vapors before release. His gear included standard protective coveralls, a respirator, and a helmet-mounted camera that automatically recorded his inspections for compliance purposes. He also carried a handheld gas detector and a small wrench set for line tests. The ammonia unit was an older model, installed before newer safety regulations required automated shutoff valves. Though maintenance logs showed minor leaks over the years, the plant's internal team had classified them as non-critical. That morning, Denton arrived at 8 a.m., reviewed the log books with a floor supervisor, and proceeded to the scrubber platform around 9:45. Weather records later showed air temperature at 82 degrees Fahrenheit, wind from the southeast at 6 miles per hour, ideal for dispersion, but humid enough to trap odor. A shift technician mentioned a faint whistle near the secondary valve, but operations continued. Denton noted the observation on his clipboard before climbing the graded stairs to the upper level. The camera footage, later recovered, showed him moving methodically, occasionally pausing to check pressure gauges. At approximately 10:20, Denton reached a section of piping that had shown minor seepage during his last visit. The footage captured him kneeling beside the ammonia line, holding his detector close to the joint. The readout flashed briefly, prompting him to adjust a small coupling. He commented about a slight hiss, but dismissed it as residual pressure. The audio captured brief wind interference and the faint metallic creak of the platform as he repositioned himself for balance. At 10:26 a.m., a sharp pop cut through the audio. The seal had failed. The camera jolted as a white plume engulfed the frame, the lens frosting from the blast of pressurized ammonia. Denton staggered back, the hiss swelling into a roar. In seconds, the vapor burned through exposed skin and eyes, and his first breath evidently triggered a violent inflammatory reaction in his lungs, causing immediate airway closure and collapse. He tried to move, but the vapor concentration had risen to several thousand parts per million, levels known to cause rapid airway injury and respiratory arrest, with exposures near 5,000 parts per million considered rapidly fatal. The recording caught a single gasp before the feed blurred and went dark. Alarms triggered across the plant. Within 2 minutes, response teams in chemical suits reached the scrubber platform, forcing their way through a low-lying white cloud with water fog cannons. Denton was found near the base, his suit rigid and frost-burned, respirator still sealed but clouded with condensation inside, consistent with a delayed seal break rather than removal. His gas detector still flashed lethal readings as crews vented the line. The coroner later cited acute inhalation injury, pulmonary edema, and dermal chemical burns consistent with high-concentration ammonia exposure. Denton's helmet camera was recovered intact and turned over to investigators. Review of the footage confirmed a progressive valve failure that had gone unaddressed for at least 3 inspection cycles. The incident led to federal fines against Tripar's maintenance contractor for neglecting corrosion control. The plant's ammonia system was permanently decommissioned. His 2 children, ages 9 and 12, were taken in by their mother, from whom he had been divorced for 4 years. It was September 3, 2015, deep in the Witwatersrand Basin of South Africa, where the earth had been mined for gold for over a century. The mine had been closed years earlier after flooding and instability, but small groups of informal miners, known locally as zama-zamas, still worked the seams illegally. Sifo Thembu, 29, had been working underground since he was 17. Once an equipment operator for a legal contractor, he had turned to informal mining after layoffs hit the region. His phone served as both his torch and his record keeper. He filmed every find, hoping to prove he could supply a legitimate buyer one day. The men he worked with trusted his eye for rock. He carried simple gear, a chisel, a headlamp with dying batteries, a face cloth for dust, and a cheap respirator. The tunnels they explored were remnants of an old gold shaft near Welcome, sealed off decades ago after a minor collapse. The concrete plug had been breached years earlier, and miners carved narrow paths back toward the old veins. Shoring beams, scavenged wood, bent metal, held up tons of loose rock. The air inside was oxygen-poor and heavy with dust, adding to the danger. Official surveys had long marked the area as structurally unstable, but rumors spread of untouched ore near the 600-foot level, and Sifo's team decided to go deeper. They entered before dawn to avoid detection. The footage later recovered from Sifo's phone begins around 4:30 a.m. The men speak quietly at first, their flashlight beams bouncing across the jagged walls. They reach a small cavity where streaks of yellow glint under dust, gold-bearing ore. Laughter fills the tunnel as they tap at the vein with hammers. At 4:42 a.m., a faint cracking sound is audible. The men pause as dust sifts from above. A short silence follows, broken by another sharper crack, the sound of a support beam shearing under weight. The flashlight beam jolts as someone yells to run. The camera image trembles violently as footsteps pound on rock. In seconds, the narrow passage groans, then gives way. The ceiling drops in sections, collapsing with a deep, thunderous rumble. The phone captures flashes of splintering wood, rock fragments striking helmets, and one man falling forward as the air turns to choking dust. The collapse sent vibrations to the surface, alerting locals to the site. It took rescuers 36 hours to reach the breach and nearly 3 days to complete recovery. The first responders entered cautiously, fearing secondary collapses. They found the first 2 bodies near the tunnel mouth, buried under debris but still wearing respirators. Beyond that point, the passage had been completely sealed by fallen rock. Police later recovered Saifo's phone near the entrance, crushed under a slab but with its memory card intact. The video was used by mining inspectors to confirm a structural failure triggered by unsupported excavation. The shaft was resealed with concrete, and the area was declared permanently closed to prevent further entry. Officials listed all 5 men as deceased. 2 were never recovered. Saifo's family received no compensation, but held a small memorial at a nearby church. It was August 21, 2016, in the northern section of Klamath National Forest, California. Afternoon winds had shifted suddenly, scattering fine ash over miles of dry timber. From the ridge, the steel outline of the fire watch tower stood solitary. Riley was 31, a seasonal fire lookout employed by the U.S. Forest Service. For 5 consecutive summers, she had rotated between stations across the Pacific Northwest, preferring the isolation of mountaintop duty over office work. She was known among colleagues for her accuracy in wind readings and her calm dispatch calls, often logging minute-by-minute updates even during lightning storms. The job suited her discipline. Steady observation, no distractions, total accountability. The tower she manned was an aging steel frame from the 1950s, 40 feet above a ridge of dry manzanita and pine. Inside, everything was routine. A radio, a laptop for digital logs, a weather kit, binoculars, and an alidade for pinpointing fire bearings. At 10 a.m., she'd recorded clear skies and light wind from the south. By noon, she noted the temperature had reached 95 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity down to 11%. The forest below looked still, but heat shimmered on the horizon. At 3:37 p.m., dispatch logs noted her transmission describing a column forming about 5 miles south, recorded as low intensity. She followed standard protocol: direction, estimated acreage, wind velocity, before typing manageable in her remarks. The footage from her interior monitoring camera showed her briefly glancing toward the south window, squinting. Outside, the faint gray plume seemed harmless, trailing sideways in the crosswind. She had no way of knowing the wind at the valley floor had already reversed, pushing the blaze directly uphill. By 3:45, a reddish tint began to flicker through the glass. The first ash flakes drifted across the deck. Riley turned back to her instruments, updating coordinates. Her final transmission, captured on dispatch logs, mentioned flaring movement, unexpected rate. That was the first warning. Within minutes, embers began skipping the slope, igniting brush below the access ladder. The safety camera caught her standing, scanning through the window, then moving quickly to shut the trapdoor leading to the stairs. The glow outside deepened to orange, and the light inside the cabin pulsed with each gust. The wind picked up, a hard, whistling pressure that carried the sound of a low, continuous roar. Then came the distortion, heat mirage visible on the feed. At 3:52 p.m., the fire reached the ridge. The roar beneath the structure swelled into a freight train sound as radiant heat wrapped the tower. The metal supports expanded audibly, pinging and snapping under stress. Through the window, the valley was gone, replaced by flame. Riley backed toward the interior wall, reaching instinctively for her radio and heat hood. The next frame captured the windows exploding inward, glass and flame sweeping across the cabin. 7 miles away, an engine crew monitoring the same sector saw the temperature spike on their handheld infrared. They tried to reach her over the radio. No response. Satellite detection later confirmed a thermal surge exceeding 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit directly beneath her location. The signal from her tower went offline minutes later. When recovery teams reached the ridge 2 days afterward, the tower was gone. Only the warped steel legs remained, half buried in ash. Her remains were located roughly 15 feet downslope, partially sheltered under collapsed debris, identified through dental records. The Forest Service ruled it a line-of-duty loss. Her logbook and radio fragments were placed in a sealed case and sent to her family in Washington. The lookout station she manned was never rebuilt. Her parents declined all interviews, asking that her recordings stay sealed. It was July 3rd, 2018 in Shenzhen, China. The air shimmered faintly around a 42-story office complex undergoing facade renovations. High above the noise of traffic and drills, two window cleaners worked suspended by cables and steel brackets, their platform swaying slightly against the blue glass wall. Chen Yu, 28, had been with the maintenance firm for 4 years. He was quiet, rarely spoke during shifts, and was known for working with calm precision. Before this job, he had briefly trained as a machinist, but switched careers when the factory closed. Li Feng, 31, was his senior, and had logged hundreds of hours on high-rise rigs across Guangdong. Both men earned modest wages, but took pride in working where most people wouldn't dare look down. Their gear, aluminum platform, twin steel cables, electric hoist, and nylon harnesses, was standard, but aging. Their job that day was part of a documented renovation for the building's property group, which required time-lapse footage for progress verification. The camera, fixed on a nearby rooftop, captured hours of slow movement across the glass panels. It showed the two men beginning work at 8 a.m., descending from the roof's north side. Weather data later confirmed mild wind speeds, around 9 miles per hour. Maintenance records indicated the platform had passed inspection 6 months earlier, though corrosion had been noted in one left side coupling but deemed non-critical. The morning supervisor, behind schedule due to overlapping projects, signed off their release without checking cable tension. By 10:30 a.m., the time-lapse frames showed the platform stationary about 35 floors up. Chen and Li were working the upper windows of an executive suite. Each movement was barely visible in the sped-up footage. Small gestures, the swing of a squeegee, the glint of a safety helmet catching light. Unbeknownst to them, the left suspension cable had begun to fray at the point where it looped over the roof beam. Each gust of wind made it twist microscopically, grinding through the weakened steel strands. The tilt was gradual, imperceptible to the men inside their harnesses. At normal speed, witnesses on the street later described hearing a sharp metallic pop. The platform dipped left, shuddered, then jerked violently against the facade. One worker braced himself against the railing while the other tried to reach the emergency lever. The left cable gave way completely, with a recoil that snapped upward into the beam. The entire rig swung like a pendulum, striking the building hard enough to shatter 2 panels. The right cable held for less than 3 seconds before the angle and load tore it free. The platform broke apart mid-air, pieces scattering as the 2 men fell 400 feet to the plaza below. Impact analysis estimated the fall at about 5 seconds. A passing courier witnessed the descent, reporting only a blur of dark motion and a burst of glass fragments hitting the street. The debris field extended nearly 30 feet from the base of the tower, littered with shredded nylon, one twisted railing section, and Li's detached safety clip still locked. Emergency services cordoned off the area within minutes. Both men were pronounced dead at the scene from blunt force trauma. Investigators determined that the left suspension joint had corroded internally, concealed beneath a rusted sleeve. The firm's inspection log was found falsified, backdated 2 months. Their families arrived from nearby districts the following morning. Compensation negotiations began that same week, mediated by the District Labor Bureau. Both households received standardized payouts under workplace fatality law, barely covering funeral expenses. Thanks for watching. Like what you see? Click here for more.